Denzel Curry is one of my favorite rappers. Period. He's in my top 5 easily. Yet, I feel like being a Denzel Curry fan is an odd, almost paradoxical feeling at times. He's an incredibly versatile artist who has made many mainstream hits and who's worked with big names in the rap and hip hop world. He's respected by the old heads for his lyrical talent and respected by the new jeds for being able to do fun party tracks and bass-destroying bops as well. Now, you've obviously seen the title and the thumbnail. Some of you are curious as to why I think he's underrated. Well, despite the fact that he's made many great albums and has made an undeniable impact on hip-hop in the last decade and still going, I feel like he isn't spoken about much. Like, everyone just says, yeah, Denzel, he's really good. And then they just leave it at that. Meanwhile, you talk to anyone about, say, Tyler the Creator, they can name their favorite album, when they first heard him, and usually even their top 5 songs if they're really into him. But for Denzel, I don't really see that. Though if that's just my personal experience, let me know. I'd love to start a discussion about Denzel Curry and his music. Anyways, I feel like even when I mention Denzel Curry to even a lot of other rap fans, the conversation just gets cold. And why? He's got appeal to both the mainstream and the underground. The guy has juggled so many sounds effortlessly. Hell, he's one of the leading voices of the SoundCloud era of rap. Well, that's what I'm here to sort of go against. To make a deep dive on Denzel's albums and major releases. Because, I want to talk about his work, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. Just to establish here though, I'm going to focus this video on his albums as well as Unlocked and King of the Mischievous South Volume 2. Because while they aren't listed as albums on Wikipedia, they both had such large rollouts that I'd basically say they're album level efforts from him. So get comfy, maybe grab yourself a snack or something, because this might be a much longer one. And let's talk about Denzel Curry's great discography. Of course, we're going to need to take a little pit stop first before we start talking about Denzel's first album. I think it'd be good for those in the know and for those who don't know to get a little bit of background history on Denzel Curry. That way, we can understand the influences and life experiences he may be putting into these albums. Denzel Curry was born Denzel Ray Don Curry on February 16, 1995. He was born and raised in Miami Gardens, Florida. Specifically, he grew up in the Carroll City neighborhood of Miami, which from what I understand is a pretty rough neighborhood to grow up in. As someone who spent most of his life in Florida, I know how rough of a neighborhood Carroll City can be. His life was not an easy one, dealing with the daily struggle of systematic racism rampant within our American society, but also the struggles of not being born in a super rich area either. One major tragedy that would paint his perspective on the world, and one he mentions in some of his songs, is the death of his brother Tree Johnson in 2014. There are reports of his brother beating 2 dogs with a metal pipe. When the officers arrived though, they chose to beat, pepper spray, and tase him multiple times. He passed on later in his wounds in a hospital. And there's nothing I can really add here but to say that this was an obvious incident of police brutality. Hopefully the officers got the punishment they deserve, but knowing the world we're in, I really doubt it. On a much different note though, Denzel Curry started rapping in the 6th grade and even released a mixtape called King Remembered Underground Tape 1991 to 1995, which was very Southern hip-hop inspired, specifically from the Memphis rap sound, of which Florida rap would pull heavily from Memphis rap sound and even majorly influenced a lot of the way many artists from the SoundCloud era would sound. Many of these artists were from Florida anyway, so it all adds up. Somehow, his first mixtape got into the hands of Space Ghost Perp, who is basically a Florida rap legend and is the founding member of the Raider Clan, which was probably the biggest hip-hop collective from the South at the time. Though the late 2000s to early 2010s was the peak era with rap collectives like ASAP Mob and Odd Future. Anyways, Perp somehow got his hands on Denzel's mixtape, posted it on social media, and made Denzel an official member of the Raider Clan. Later on, Denzel would release his second mixtape, King of the Mischievous South, Volume 1 Underground Tape 1996. Remember this name, it'll be important later. Here you can really hear the Memphis horror sound Denzel was really pulling from, which was followed soon by Strictly for My Raiders. At least, I think it's pronounced Raiders, but I don't really know what this acronym stands for. Which was a bit more explorative for him, exploring more sounds from cloud rap, trap, and even some melodic production here and there. Eventually, the Raider Clan would disband, like many rap collectives of the time, and thus this left Curry to explore the musical world on his own, which now leads us to his first album. To establish how I'm going to cover each album, I'll give an overall take on an album and cover the high and low points, only because we have a lot to cover, and 2, I don't think you want to hear me talk about every single song, because I might not have a lot to say about literally every song, positive or not. So with all that established, let's talk about Nostalgic 64. This album feels like a growth on the style Denzel was showcasing on his first 3 mixtapes, mixing in elements of Memphis rap with hard bass and distortion that I think are pretty iconic elements of Florida's hip-hop sound. We start the album with the song Zone 3, and this is a great tone setter. It's got a great beat with some nice synths and bassy drums. Denzel's flow on here is immaculate, switching a couple times on the track, yet it always stays on rhythm with the beat. From here, you'll probably hear me talk a lot about how Denzel has just mastered flow. I think the only other rapper who could flow like him is JID. Seriously, Denzel switches up his flows all the time on his songs, and it never comes off as annoying or hard to listen to. The next song I want to speak about is the song Parents. Here we have a much more digital sound. It sounds like something you could hear actually coming out of an N64 or a Dreamcast game. But then the digital glitching and distortion comes in and make it just sound a lot darker. Denzel's verse on here is also pretty hard hitting. He speaks about people who tend to be incredibly irresponsible with themselves and their situations. He also talks about the unstable households that can create these kind of bad habits that keep people trapped in bad situations. It helps that the atmosphere on the song really adds this sort of dreamy, nightmarish atmosphere. After that, I think another early highlight is the song Dark and Violent. And here is where we see Denzel lean super heavily into that Memphis horrorcore, even doing some of the classic southern flows that remind me of 3 6 Mafia. He does his flow perfectly, and you can tell that he has an obvious passion for the style, because while he is definitely influenced, he's not completely ripping it off. Hanuman kind ripped off Project Pat. The feature verse on here is by J.K. Reaper, and it's great, laying out to the listener the story of a man who gets dragged against his will into street life and it institutionalizes him, keeping him in jail and ruining his life. The whole song is this disturbing vibe, even when the beat switches, which is done incredibly well. I love the vocal samples in here, sounding like something from a classic late 80s or early 90s horror film. Next, I want to talk about the title track. Well, sort of the title track, I guess? N64. When the song starts, I love this beat, the drums and the synths building into something that sounds powerful. It's eerie and creates a nice feeling. But when it gets done building, I feel like I start to like it less. It comes off to me as a bit obnoxious. Like, all these elements separately I like, but I feel like nothing on here clicks like it should. Maybe if Denzel had also some vocal effects on it to layer it in, or maybe add himself into the song itself, but it feels like this beat overtakes all the hard-hitting things Denzel's trying to talk about on here. Yet, we immediately switch into a song I really like. Might be my favorite song on the project here, along with Parents. That song being Like Me. A beautiful piano sample with the clapping percussion, Denzel rapping about love and the sensuality with it. It's a heavy left turn for this album sound-wise, but I really dig it. It reminds me of something from Graduation-era Kanye. Something that sounds like it'd be a deeper cut on that album, but something I'd listen to more often than not. It's a nice smooth track with a nice message. And finally, we get to the final track, A Day in the Life of Denzel Curry Part 2. And this has heavy cloud rap influence, like something that'd be on a Lil B or Young Lean album back in the day. Denzel does a sing-songy flow that reminds me a lot of Bone Thugs and Harmony, which is always a positive for me, since I grew up listening to a lot of Bone Thugs because my mom's a big fan. It also helps that he nails that style pretty much perfectly. He also lays this darker imagery and poetry throughout his final verse. It's an honestly beautiful ending to an album that tends to lean on the darker side of the spectrum, ending the album by singing, "Life is no game," which is the perfect way to end the album and tying the video game influences all over the place here. Overall, this is a pretty solid first showcase. If I were to compare it to any album, I'd compare it to Section 80. What I mean is that it's a great first album, showing us the kind of sounds and ideas he'll be working with, but also where he could improve. In a sense, this is like seeing your favorite artist's early paintings, films, or whatever they were making before they blew up. You could see all the influences, but they haven't quite culminated into the complete package yet. So for now, this is going at the top of the ranking because, well, it's the only album I've spoken about so far. After this, Denzel would release 2 EPs, 32 Zell and Planet Shrooms. I won't be going too much into them here or ranking them because they weren't super major releases to me. These felt more like he was exploring the sounds on N64 just a little bit more. Though, he did get his first big hit on these EPs when he released the track Ultimate, which got big because it was turned into a pretty big meme back in the day. But this would also give him the opening he needed to make much more massive releases and get into new places, such as being a part of the 2016 XXL freshman class. Which now the XXL freshman class doesn't mean shit because they let vultures in like Ian. But at the time, this was a big deal. And I think it's a generally agreed upon idea that this might be the best freshman class. Yet, with all this rising stardom, he was just getting started. In 2016, 3 years after N64, he'd release his second album, Imperial. To me, and likely many others, this was their first big Denzel project they listened to. This was the one where, if you wanted to listen to all of Denzel's albums, this is probably the best point to start. But let's actually talk about the album before I go off about something else. Starting with ULT, or Alt. And here we already start to hear giant improvement from Denzel. From the lyrics to the production, the vocal effects, it's all so much stronger and he creates a much starker atmosphere here. He's really laying out his life on this song. He weaves in all these quick lines referencing oppression, the Black American experience, and even elements of powerful political statements. The hook is super catchy, creating a powerful chorus that leads into a strong chant. It's all so damn good and drags you into the album perfectly. Next up, I want to speak about the song Naughty Head. It's a hard-hitting song where Denzel speaks about where he's from, speak about how the culture he comes from gets disrespected, but also how he'll represent it until he dies. But also speaking on the unique culture of Carol City and what makes it different from most of Miami, using the idea of his naughty hair as a part of that culture, which is a pretty common hairstyle that is a part of black culture, at least from what I understand. But it also gets disrespected often by white people who just don't respect different groups from them. On this song, he also brings Rick Ross on here as a feature verse, who was also a Florida legend from Carol City. Now, while I'd say this isn't the typical song I've heard from Rick Ross, he gives his classic smooth style of delivery and it fits pretty well. This song is a classic example of a hip-hop tradition of repping the city and culture you grew up in. While I never grew up in Miami, I can always respect someone who gives love to the background and where they came from. Another highlight on here is Me Now, and this is one of the darker tracks on the album, speaking about the Bible, his beliefs, and the spirituality behind it, while also speaking on his fears in the afterlife. He talks about how God has given him his purpose, but how he also grapples with the corruption and hatred within himself, how he uses it as a sort of inspiration, but how it also hurts himself, using these metaphors to look internally at himself, but also using this to examine himself where he stands in the eyes of heaven and God. After this, we get another dark note with the song Story, no title, a more conceptual song about his own story and come-up, introspecting upon himself and looking at his story from different angles, but also showing that it's hard to draw any conclusions, much like a story without a title. He looks at his origins and thinks about how it affects him now and how it affected him then, painted the darkness and corruption around in his environment. A great lyrical showcase. After this though, we release a lot of the tension with the song This Life. He's mixing in his arrogance, but also his wisdom on the song to illustrate how far he's come, but also how far he has to go, acknowledging how his life is currently and how much he's changed since a kid, but also anxious and still feeling a lot of the pain that comes from his past. He's juggling the feelings of luxury and anxiety that he feels on a daily basis, speaking on his hard work, but also the struggle behind it. Next up, we have the song Zenith, featuring Joey Badass, and this is also one of my favorite tracks here. Both rappers on here landed great verses with so much to pull from, but also with a beautiful beat underscoring everything they're speaking about. This song speaks about how far both men have come, but also targeting elements of corruption here and there throughout. And finally, we end If Tomorrow's Not Here, a jazzy, conceptual showcase from Denzel, writing from the perspective of prisoners, specifically his friends Reuben Slick Thompson and Darnell Nell Butler. It's a smooth, jazzy, funky rap track to close out the album, but also critiquing and questioning a lot of the world around him through the experiences of his close friends, speaking on their personal fears, but also a lot of his own fears through this concept. A haunting yet beautiful song to end the album with. So, yeah, Imperial's a massive step forward for Denzel in pretty much every aspect. There's many artists where their second album is so good that the mainstream treats it pretty much as their debut. Everything here, from the concepts, the lyrics, the honesty, the instrumentals, this is the Denzel Curry everyone speaks about. And while he will grow from here, a lot from here, this is the rippling point where everyone starts with Denzel for a good reason. This is going straight to the top, above N64. 2 years later though, we get Denzel's next major release, with Taboo is Denzel's third major album, and one that I'd say is pretty popular in the mainstream, maybe even more than Imperial. Though it's also one I'd say is a lot more conceptual and experimental than his previous two. This album has a different structure and is split into 3 sections or acts, the first called Light, the second being called Gray, and the third being called Dark. Essentially, the tone and subject matter of each part slowly drifting from positivity to negativity here and there, allowing Denzel to experiment but also dig into all sorts of different ideas. But let's start talking about the album, starting with the light side. The first track I want to highlight is Black Balloons. It's one of my favorite Denzel songs, and I honestly think Denzel works really well over jazzier instrumentation. But that also may be my bias, since I tend to really like jazzier rap and jazz-like production anyway. The lyrics though, while sounding cheery, have darker undertones to all of them. The image of black balloons floating above someone's head implies some sort of tragedy or darkness. The only place I think you'd reasonably see black balloons is at a funeral, unless you're at a particularly goth birthday party, I guess. Here we could feel a lot of pain and traumas Denzel's talking about, yet he's masking it all behind a fun, funky beat. Honestly, its closest comparison is Hey Ya from Outkast, and that's always a good comparison. I want to then switch focus onto the song Cash Maniac. There isn't too much I want to talk about, but I love the beat and production here. It has this R&B poppy sound. It reminds me actually a lot of Flower Boy era Tyler the Creator. It's just a sound I like, but Denzel adds in all sorts of different elements, inflections, and different sounds that make it his own thing. The next one I want to talk about is Super Saiyan Superman. I love the very digital, distorted beat here. The synthetic bloops on here sounding like something from Metroid or the Alien films. Mixing with the heavy bass distortion is great, and as usual, the vocal effects here are incredible. It's a great track, but nothing that I'd say is too meaningful lyrically. One of the best tracks on here, and one of Denzel's best songs ever, is Sirens. We have a hauntingly gorgeous instrumental with an unnerving hook. Denzel sings really well here, but Billie Eilish as backing vocals adds this element of beauty to the otherwise dark-sounding hook. Denzel's verse is fueled by an incredible amount of anger, speaking on the political state of America at the time and its corruption, which has only gotten more corrupt as time has gone on. JID is the feature verse on here, and he's the perfect rapper to pick if you want someone to complement Denzel's style of wordplay. Both of these rappers are lyrical peers and have immaculate control of their flow. Everything on here ties together to make a potent, dark political statement. Easily one of the best Denzel Curry songs to ever be released. Immediately after this though, we have the popular song on here, Clout Cobain. I think this might be one of the darkest songs of the album, painting this imagery of a suicidal mind state and the environments that creates these thoughts. Also speaking about the corruption and bad habits that people in hip-hop sometimes love to endorse, such as taking pills and getting into violent conflict. It's a dark-sounding track with heavy horror influence. Denzel's verses on here are masterful and land everything he needs to convey. The next major track on here is Vengeance, which is a hard horrorcore-inspired distorted track, but it also includes great features on here. JPEG's feature on here is great, and it fits perfectly on a more out-there beat like this one. Zillakami's work on here is super solid and adds this gritty feeling to the song. This is easily one of Denzel's best banger tracks, if you get what I mean. The closer track on here is Black Metal Terrorist, and I'm a little conflicted on it, because while it is a decent track, I don't really get why it's the final one. It doesn't really make a general statement on everything here, nor really ties up the album sonically either. And really, that ties into my opinion on this whole album in general. I really like what Denzel was attempting to do on this album. He speaks on all sorts of different things and aims for all sorts of sounds, tones, and feelings, but I think this results as the album feeling a bit more of a mess. It's a solid album, and I like that he's still willing to experiment on his music, but it feels like there's very little cohesion here sound-wise or content-wise. You could still be all over the board with your ideas and concepts and tie them all together pretty well. In fact, he's done this already with his previous album. I like a lot of the songs on here individually, but there's also many here that just went in one ear and left the other. So overall, it's good, but it's not topping Imperial for me. Though, on Denzel's next major album, he goes for a much more direct approach. Zoo is Denzel's fourth album, and as I said previously, he's going for a much less conceptual, high-concept album and doing something more direct. Mostly making an album that's all about representing Carol City, its sound, and being a general love letter to Miami. We immediately start the album with the title track, Zoo. We have a great tone setter, something that's both melodic but also fun. I adore the hook on here, especially the line, M's all on my belt, I feel like Majin Buu. I really appreciate that Denzel isn't afraid to reference his favorite stuff. And I'd say that Denzel is one of the few rappers that can reference pop culture and nerd culture stuff without it sounding corny. I think this is because when he does it, it's usually framed with clever wordplay or imagery. Anyways, getting back on topic, the biggest track on here is the second on the album, Ricky. I also love this song, and in my opinion, this is Denzel's best hit song, if you get what I mean. It's got a great beat and has a super unique sounding drum. I don't know if that's a steel drum sample or something, but I love it. Mixed with the chords and the bouncy 808s, it's great. It also helps that Denzel gives a nice hard verse, but also speaks on some real advice. He speaks of his mom, his dad, and also his days in the Raider clan. I even think on here he explains his style and sound pretty perfectly on the song. We was 3-6 Wu-Tang mixed with Dipset. Which, yeah, I could definitely hear influences from all three in Denzel's music, even early on. The next big hit, also the song I want to speak on next, is Speedboat. Again, we got a great beat. The piano chords on top of the trap hi-hats make for a beat with just nice texture. The hook is also super catchy. I catch myself humming it unintentionally all the time. Denzel is also just sliding all over this beat. I swear he does like 4 flow switches on here. And then the sudden gospel chorus is so good. This feels experimental and unpredictable, but in a way that feels fully cooked. This is so good, and I've already listened to it like 20 times. Let's transition to the next song I want to talk about. Carol Mart. This beat is also really good. The vocal sample is clean. This is a perfect bass-destroying Florida rap song. This feels like the ultimate song to blast out of the car if you're really feeling yourself, or if you just want to piss off the elderly. Next up, we got Shake 88, which feels like a continuation of the song before it, but still incredibly interesting on its own. This would make for a great party track to play at the function or something. The hook is also a fun chant that I know people are screaming at the top of their lungs at every live show. And the closer on this album is PAT, and funnily enough, it's a similar ending to Taboo's final track. But this is much better because it feels like a nice fitting ending for the album. An album that's already been high energy for most of its runtime deserves a high energy ending. It also helps that the beat is really nice. It's distorted, nasty, hard, but it doesn't overwhelm your ears. Also, the line "all black sticks out like Voldemort" goes so fucking hard. If I had to sum up the feeling of Zoo in one word, it's hard. It's a high energy album that gives you nothing but hit after hit after hit, yet it's not doing too much to overwhelm you. It's clearly a love letter to where he came from, but done with so much finesse and style. And I mean, can you really truly hate someone for representing where they're from? Again, I'm not from Miami whatsoever, but I have to appreciate his amount of effort he put into this love letter for his city. This is gonna go above Taboo, but under Imperial. Denzel's next big work, though, was not an album, but rather a collaborative EP with Kenny Beats. Rapper-producer collaborative projects are a long-respected tradition within the rap scene. They usually bring the best out of both parties involved. And look, I know this isn't an album, but instead one of Denzel's EPs, but with how much effort he and Kenny Beats put into promoting this, I consider it an album-level effort. I mean, they released an entire short film that went with this thing. If that is an album-level effort, then I really don't know what is. Here, Kenny and Denzel do a lot of experimentation. Hell, I'd even go as far as to say this is Denzel's most abstract and experimental project to date. And that's saying a lot, since Denzel usually has at least a few tracks per album that could really push the style to different places. Anyways, let's talk about Unlocked, and its many highlights. Let's start with Take It Back. And immediately we're hit with a banging beat, and Denzel's performance has this crazy aggression and gravel to it. It's like we're being dropped into this strange world with them, and it's not a gentle one. The beat switch on here is nasty, and the vocal effects are so good, immediately creating the tone for a project that'll be hard to pin down. Next up, let's talk about Pyro, Leak 2019. This beat is just incredible. I know I said that a lot, but Kenny Beats just knows how to cook up something that's really nice. And this is also one of my favorite Denzel verses of all time. Like, he opens up with some crazy ass bars. My bitch bad like battle rappers that make albums with no outcome. X the middleman, no Malcolm. Come on, man. That's like 4 bars combined into just 2 lines. It's so good, man. My next favorite song on here, and my favorite beat, is So Incredible. And seriously, this is the best beat on the whole EP. It has this funky bass line with some insane drums, and Denzel's aggressive flow on the beat somehow makes for a great experience. The closer on this album is Cosmic. This is the perfect closer for the album. It has this almost boom bap type of feel, but has almost none of the structure of a boom bap song. Denzel's presence on here is so great, his voice going up and down, almost sounding like the legend Old Dirty Bastard here for a little bit. But trust me, that's a large compliment coming from me. I love Old Dirty Bastard. So, mask off here. This has been my favorite Denzel Curry project since I first heard it. I wanted to be fair and give every album a chance, and they will have them, trust me. But this is my favorite. It's experimental, hard to pin down, and yet gorgeous with all these disparate elements coming together. It reminds me heavily of Madlib and MF Doom's Mad Villainy. But it's still very much its own unique album. I think this album will be a heavy influence on the people who hear it coming down the line. Hell, it's heavily influenced me on what I'd want to do if I got the chance to make an album. Also, this has an incredible remix album called Unlocked 1.5. It has so many great features and verses and reworkings of songs. If you want even more Unlocked, that's the place to go. And yeah, this is going straight to the top and dethroning Imperial. But if you thought Denzel stopped his experimental streak here, you'd be very wrong. On Melt My Eyes, See Your Future, Denzel continues his experimental streak, but also gets far more personal and introspective. This is also the first concept album he has made since Taboo? Well, okay, Unlocked also has a concept behind it too, but that's an EP, so it's not a concept album. Whatever, you get what I'm trying to say. Denzel on here takes a much heavier influence from jazz all across the project, but also mixes in influences from places that you would not expect. But without further ado, let's talk about some of the tracks on here. The opening track is Melt Session Number 1 and is a feast for the ears, combining together sung backing vocals, beautiful keys from a keyboard with some thick, nice production. Taking this and mixing this into some nice room-filling reverb on Denzel's vocals is great. Denzel is rapping incredibly on here and lays out the entire concept for you. Denzel's looking back on himself, his wrongs, his pains, his rights, and melting his eyes. Evolving into a new version of himself, continuing to walk the world to become his truest, best version of himself, shedding his sins and taking responsibility. And maybe, this is just me, but a lot of the imagery for the music videos on the album is very sci-fi influence. The whole melting his eyes part of the album feels inspired by the Dune series, which is an event that also happens to a character within those books, seeing a vision of the future but destroying his eyes in the process. Sorry for the spoilers for like a almost 100-year-old book. I actually don't know how old it is, but sorry in advance. Or in the past, whatever. Maybe I'm stretching, but there are at least visual cues taken from Trigun and Cowboy Bebop throughout the visual material, excluding the video for Zatoichi. The biggest hit on here is the track Walkin', and it's a gorgeous track, continuing the jazzy sound from the opener, but now with heavier drums and hip-hop influence. Denzel is giving one of his hardest verses, speaking on the ills in the world and how he has to keep walking despite the pain. The beat switch and flow switch feels so grand on here, like he's crying out to a crowd of people to listen to him, but the message may be lost. He's a wanderer in this world, just walking through it blind. The next big moment for me is John Wayne. It's a slight sound switch up for the album, sounding a bit more gritty than the previous songs, while keeping its jazz influences. The hook is super catchy, comparing himself to the famous Western actor John Wayne, but also speaking about gun violence and the scary things you might have to do to protect yourself as an oppressed person in our world. Also, I did notice the reference to Nas's track, I Gave You Power. It's super clever, and I think that was intentional. Though the first major sound switch up on here is the track Troubles with T-Pain and Kenny Beats, leaning into a more pop sound, sounding very nice, light, and bubbly in comparison to the heavy jazz influence on the rest of the album. He speaks on going through the struggles he's been going through and how some problems probably won't ever go away. T-Pain's feature on here is probably the best feature on the entire album. He has a phenomenal moment of emotional vulnerability, so many quotable lines as well. My favorite line being, "Drunk underwater, now they going clown fishing." That's both funny and a little bit sad, but I love the mixed emotions it gives me. This is immediately followed up by a posse cut of all things, though I'm not complaining. Posse cuts are one of the best traditions in all of rap. It helps that everyone gives incredible verses. I mean, Denzel and Jid on the same track will always go crazy, but Tia Kareen also has a fun delivery here too. After this, we probably have the vibiest track on here, X-Wing. The trap drums mixed with beautiful strings, as well as Denzel's slippery flow is incredible. Here is probably Denzel's most confident track on here, reassuring himself that he's on to the next big thing and he'll get there. But I'll say this track is way better on the deluxe, but we'll cover that later. The penultimate track on here is Zatoichi, and this is probably the most out there track on the whole album, pulling a lot of influence from breakbeat of all places. Yet it all works. Denzel's delivery here is incredible, and Slowthai adds a lot of nice stuff to the chorus. Here we see Denzel rapping about himself and his struggles, but here he's accepted himself. He's become like Zatoichi the blind samurai. While he may be walking the world blind, he's now able to find his way, and able to lead the fellow blind, which is more of a metaphor for anyone suffering or oppressed, but you get what he means. The ending track is The Ills, and this is the best closer from any Denzel Curry album. He speaks on his mindset and how it's changed throughout all this time. He's speaking from a place of not just confidence, but acceptance, on top of a classic sounding rap beat, one that could have been made from almost any rap era. He's gone through a lot and is now in a much better place than where he was before. This feels like an album that Denzel has wanted to make for years, an idea that has laid seeds and sprouted from all of his previous work, culminating into a complete experience. I feel like this is what he really wanted to do with Taboo, but now it's fully come together, making a powerful, personal, and beautiful statement on one's mindset and growth. Hell, this is another one of my favorite projects from him. It's neck and neck with Unlocked for me. This album, as well as its insanely good deluxe, which is done with live instrumentation and jazz, is one of my favorite rap projects, probably ever. So it's going right to the top of Unlocked. Yet, this is not the last major project from Denzel for now. After all this self-examination, he would soon go back to his roots. Remember way back at the start of the video when I said to keep an eye on one of Denzel's earlier mixtapes? Later on, Denzel will release his second mixtape, King of the Mischievous South, Volume 1, Underground Tape, 1996. Remember this name, it'll be important later. Yeah, what I said there. So here we are today, with a commercial mixtape, which is basically an album with different marketing, and it also happens to be a sequel to one of Denzel's earliest mixtapes. Here we see Denzel go all the way back to his roots and the sound he was most known for in his early days, even before Imperial. So, let's just get right into it. The opening track is ultra shit. It's a great bassy southern sounding rap song. I don't really have much to say except that it's a vibe and it's a great smooth introduction to the sound of the album. One of the two big hits off this album is Hot One, and it's a classic horrorcore sounding track, except now after Denzel's vast improvement, it sounds so much cleaner. I mean, this beat goes insane on the speakers and in the headphones. The feature by Tia Kareen and ASAP Ferg also go great. I love that Ferg is doing some small vocalizations on the track, making it sound extra dark and eerie. Also, the vocal sample from the classic track Fear No Evil labored into the background is a nice element that adds some layers to the beat. The next large hit is immediately after the last with Black Flag Freestyle. I'll also add here Kingpin Skinny Pimp's little skits and interludes on here are some of my favorite parts of the album. I didn't really know who he was before listening to this album the first time, but his voice is so smooth and he really adds a lot to the idea of this being a southern mixtape rediscovered in the modern day. However, when it comes to the song, the beat continues the very southern style of production. The verses are so smooth. That Mexican OT's verse and delivery is just really interesting. I've always liked how he has this interesting way he rolls his R's and the way he just kind of speaks dynamically on songs. The next song I want to highlight is Scared. This is a throwback to those heavy, distorted beats from the early SoundCloud era. At least, that's what I hear. The chorus is super catchy and definitely flows with the heavy 808s. The features on here are both great with a newcomer and a legend. Kenny Mason sounds a bit like Baby Keem a bit on here, but he does a very different type of flow that Keem wouldn't really do. And then we get to Project Pat, and man, he has still got it. His verse and his flow are still buttery smooth. His inflections are so cool and so exaggerated that it's really hard not to rap along with him. Another highlight is the song Cole Pimp, and here the beat is immaculate. It's my favorite one of the whole project. The sensual keys and strings with the Ty Dolla $ign vocals are like ambrosia. Denzel also brought another southern legend on here, Juicy J, and bro, he's still got it too. All the features on here are incredible. It's like Denzel formed the Southern Rap Avengers on this whole album. Denzel's verse here is also super great. He's got that classic choppy South style flow that works really well on faster drums. The track before the closer is Hit the Floor, and this feels like another throwback to the old SoundCloud sound. 808s so loud your spine is jumping and your brain is rattling. I mean hell, the beat's so hard it could probably give you CTE just by listening to it. The hook is catchy and Denzel's got another Southside legend on here, Ski Mask the Slump God. And man, you can't go wrong with a Ski Mask feature verse. He knows how to do hilarious ass punchlines that also go really hard. Denzel of course still has a huge presence on the song and he's solid as ever on here. The finale, before the ending skit, is Hoodlums, and he got two great features on here, Play That Boy Zay and the legendary A$AP Rocky. Everything on here makes for the perfect high energy ending to a high energy album. Overall, this project is just really fun and super replayable. Not much to say except that it's an incredibly well made throwback. Also, the deluxe is really good too. I'll be putting it right under Unlocked and Melt My Eyes, but above Imperial. And yeah, that's the final ranking. You'll probably agree with it or hate it. That's kind of just how rankings go. So, after all that, we could see Denzel has one of the best rap discographies of any rapper from recent memory. He's versatile, he's got impact, and he's so much more than that. So then, why isn't Denzel brought up in the GOAT conversation more often? Or at least more popular or listed as more people's favorite rapper? I see rappers with far worse catalogs get allotted with the GOAT title all the time. And no disrespect to any of these guys, but Denzel has the artistry to stand toe-to-toe with the best of them. I don't know, again, maybe it's just who I'm talking to, but I feel kinda crazy sometimes seeing how little Denzel is discussed. It's not like any of his peers don't get notoriety. Jade's last two albums got a ton of love, and I'm not complaining, he's great. Yet, what is it that makes Denzel not in this conversation? The answer? It's nothing. I don't know. He's put in the work, he's got the impact, he should be in the GOAT conversation. That's what I'm trying to say. There is no reason he's not in the GOAT conversation. In my opinion, Denzel stands at the top of the mountain with many of the GOATs of the genre. And hopefully this video makes you realize that even if you don't agree, you at least get my reasoning. And yeah, that's all of Denzel Curry's albums for now. I really wanted to talk about him because I do want to talk about more music stuff in general, and I thought Denzel Curry was a great place to start. So, with all that being said, what'd you think? Do you agree with me? Do you not? Do you hate me? Do you think I'm a moron? Do you think I'm a genius? Well, with all that being said, I'll see you next time.